There is a point after the maze where the world does not look different, but you do. Dual awareness develops. It is not an explosive spectacle. It is quieter than that. In the Confucian frame, that is where cultivation starts. Social harmony is not a mood, it is a practice. It is learning to hold your role without losing your own center. The son, the neighbor, the colleague, the friend, not as costumes, as responsibilities with consequences. Psychology might call this stage metacognition, an observing mind that creates a fraction of space before impulse becomes behavior. That space is the difference between meaning and mess. Because if my inner world is loud, I do not get to dump it into the room and call it truth. That is chaos. Dual awareness does not cancel consequence. It makes consequence visible much sooner. Confucius is not asking me to transcend the human experience. He is asking me to become trustworthy inside of it. That is how the thread stays in my hand. The maturity in it is quieter too. The hero role gives way to witness, not a conqueror above the field, just someone who has learned to see the movement earlier and serve the day more cleanly because of it. After that, mythic patterns become visible in everyday life, not as superstition, more like a lens that will not turn off. I will be in an ordinary conversation, and suddenly I can hear the old story underneath, bubbling up, that of power and fear and belonging and pride. My body reacts before my mind explains. Heat and perspiration on my face, tightening all over my body, and a little surge that says, win this. Or the opposite, an urge to disappear, to leave the room without leaving. The temptation is to feel superior, like you've cracked the code, or to feel inferior like a helpless victim. But the Maasai Elder Council mirror pulls me back down to reality. It is not a lone genius decoding the tribe. It is a circle. It is accountability. It is elders who carry memory and ask, is this good for the people? In psychological terms, it is moving from private interpretation to shared reality testing. When I notice a pattern, my urge to dominate, my urge to vanish, I name it internally. Then I check it against behavior and against impact. Do I need food? Do I need sleep? Is my nervous system running hot? Am I using myth as a shortcut to avoid a hard and painful apology? Mythic pattern recognition is powerful, but without counsel, it becomes spiritual inflation. So I imagine bringing my insight into the circle, not to impress, to be questioned and to be corrected. To be reminded that the point is relationship. I listen more than I speak, and I ask, what did you actually hear me say? I keep my agreements small and real, and I show up on time, and I follow through, and I try my hardest to repair quickly. I let community hold the edges of my mind, because community is where consequence actually shows up. In that grounded space, the patterns become less about prediction and more about responsibility. The story is no longer, I can see everything. The story is, I can see enough to choose better, and I need help to continue on the path. I also keep another question near me now. Who else stands at this edge? Living or dead, and what made them trustworthy rather than theatrical? That question helps. It strips vanity out of pattern recognition. It reminds me that any wisdom worth carrying should help the next person walk more carefully, not make me feel exceptional and special and gifted. And I go to bed on time, because even the best insight turns reckless when I am sleep-starved. Then comes a harder truth, recognizing society's collective shadow, not just my own and my process. The shared, defended parts we do not want to name. The way we normalize burnout and call it ambition, the way we confuse constant stimulation with freedom, the way we outsource suffering to somewhere far away so we do not have to feel it, even the way we talk about transcendence as if it were a permission slip to ignore what we have damaged and what we have broken. The myth anchor here is indigenous land stewardship. It is not a metaphor for being nice to nature. It is a relationship with limits, with reciprocity, and with consequences that last beyond one lifetime. When I look at our culture through that lens, the shadow is obvious. Extraction without gratitude, speed without rest, consumption without care, selfishness without selflessness. Psychology might call it collective disassociation, whole systems numbing out just to keep going. And I am not exempt from this. I live inside the same currents and dilemmas. So the work gets practical and close to the body, and I ask, what do I take without noticing? Where do I break trust with my own ground? Where do I blame the world for how jagged I feel? Where do I feel superior and elevated for having more of an unevenly distributed share? Stewardship starts at the nervous system. If I cannot care for my own ground, I cannot pretend I am carrying for anything else. It also changes the spiritual frame. Relationship, not consumption. Offerings, not extraction. Community, not private intensity. I choose pause before purchase. I choose silence, sometimes instead of noise. I choose to repair what is mine to repair. The damaged relationships, the fractured habits, and the chaotic responsibilities, because meaning never cancels consequence. Indigenous land stewardship reminds me, you do not get to awaken out of duty. You wake up into it, and you stay awake by tending the ground you stand upon. The same is true of community. If we need better containers for human beings in crisis, better circles, better sanctuaries, then those things have to be built from reciprocity too. They cannot be founded on charisma, on Instagrammable looks, on extraction, or on spectacle. When I mess up, I can no longer spiritualize it. I make amends in the real world where actions land. And I keep asking, who pays for this? And I include myself in the answer. Love, if it means anything, has to become action in the world. Otherwise, it is just another elaborate romantic story that allows me to avoid paying the bill. Living between worlds sounds poetic until you try to do it on a rainy Tuesday. One foot still remembers the labyrinth, the intensity, the symbolism, and the way the mind can open into vastness and awe. The other foot is on the pavement of ordinary obligation, of bills and work and family and emails, which do not care about any of the sacred revelations. The myth anchor is Stoic civic virtue. It says, yes, the inner life matters, and you are still a citizen. Your freedom is measured by what you can govern in yourself, especially when the outside is chaotic. Psychology might frame this as integration, holding complexity without splitting into spiritual me versus real life me. The danger is escapism, using inner experiences as an excuse to disengage, or the opposite, shutting down the inner world and becoming numb because responsibility feels way too heavy to hold right now. Stoicism threads the needle. It asks for disciplined action within the law, inside of community, with clear consequence awareness. So when I feel pulled between worlds, I return to basics. I remember virtue is not a vibe. It is behavior repeated when no one applauds and when no one sees. That is what lets the mythic and the mundane coexist without either one swallowing the other. I also keep a simple rule. If my inner world is loud, I do not make big decisions. I wait and I rest. I consult someone grounded and I let time reveal what is real. Stoic civic virtue is also humility. I am one person, not a prophet, so I show up, I do my share, and I accept that some days the heroic act is being ordinary and reliable. The more this matured, the more home changed meaning again. Home became not escape from either world, but the disciplined carrying of both worlds. The blessing was not intensity, it was inhabitable life. It was being trusted to live and walk plainly and honorably and nobly. Eventually, perspective stabilizes, not permanently, not perfectly, but there is a steadier camera angle. I can sense when my mind is getting grand or when it is collapsing into despair, and I can adjust it before it becomes another crisis. It feels like being able to touch the steering wheel earlier. The myth anchor here is philosopher-king responsibility, not a fantasy ruler, but a demand. If you can see more, you must serve more, not by controlling others, by governing yourself. Psychology might call it executive function, choosing long-term values over short-term impulse, especially when emotions are loud. In the old story, wisdom without responsibility becomes pure tyranny. In a modern life, it becomes manipulation or self-deception dressed up as insight. So I treat stability like a practice and not a trophy. I keep accountability close. I welcome feedback. I do not hide behind complexity and myth. I remember law and consequence. And I remember that people around me are not characters in my narrative. They are lives with their own weight and their own journey. When I feel the old pull to turn everything into myth, I touch the ground. The Labyrinth taught me how easily meaning can swell. Perspective stabilizes when meaning is yoked to discipline. That is the kind of rule a good ruler follows. No private exemptions. Responsibility means the same standard in the dark as it does in the light of public. If I lead anything now, it is my own attention. I decide what I feed it and what I refuse and how I repair when I fail. Looking at others without superiority became part of that stability too. The more perspective settled, the less I wanted to dominate the room with what I knew and how special I think I am. The role became witness again, not hero. That is the only form of rule I can trust now. Self-rule that makes me more accountable and more ordinary and more able to serve without turning service into a throne.